There are tons of handheld PCs on the market, and they all had one thing in common. They're really, really expensive. That is until the Steam Deck came out. When the Steam Deck was released with its low-end model at $400 and its high-end model at $650, it kind of changed the handheld PC gaming landscape. At $700, the closest competitor to the Steam Deck is the ROG Ally. Yes, it's a little bit more expensive, but it's also a little bit more powerful, and because of that, I was very interested to see what this device was going to be like. My first video about the ROG Ally was my first impressions, but now I've had the device for about a month, so I figured I would do a deeper dive and talk about my experience with this device. Before I get to my thoughts on the ROG Ally, let me know what you think in the comment section down below that like button. What do you think of it? I'll read through the comments and pick a few of the best ones to give a game key to.
Hey, can I charge my ROG Ally? It's at 2%.
Hang on, I'm in a fight.
Well, I want to charge my Steam Deck.
Well, mine's lower.
You hang on too.
I'm at 1%.
Please.
Come on, please. Oh, no.
It's gonna run out.
Hang on. Oh, come on.
What do you want?
We want to charge these.
Why are you wearing hats?
So that people can tell us apart for the sponsor.
What sponsor?
It's Ugreen. The Ugreen Nexode 100-watt charger features 3 USB-C ports on the back and a USB-A port. It has a foldable plug for a very compact design, and it even has a temperature sensor to make sure it's not overheating, so you can be sure that you're safe. I'm currently charging my Steam Deck and my ROG Ally at the same time with this thing. It fits in the palm of my hand and is a fantastic device if you're looking to charge lots of stuff. But perhaps, even though this is really small, you're looking for something even smaller. Well, in that case, check out the Ugreen 45-watt charger. This one has 2 USB-C ports on the back, and each one can deliver up to 45 watts max using a single port. I'm currently using it to charge my iPad Pro and my Retroid Pocket Flip at the same time. It's incredibly small as an iPhone camera, and it's super lightweight at 3.35 ounces. So if you want to travel light and keep lots of things charged, check out the link in the description for Ugreen's Prime Day deals for up to 40% off. Again, check the link in the description for Ugreen's Prime Day deals and up to 40% off. There's a lot to like about the ROG Ally, so let's start things off with the positives, specifically compatibility. The ROG Ally's operating system is Windows, and most games are made with Windows in mind. Because of this, you don't have to worry about the verified program, you don't have to worry about your anti-cheat software not running on the ROG Ally. Almost every game is just going to run right out of the box. It doesn't matter which store you're buying your games from, they're all pretty much going to work. One of the best features of the ROG Ally is the screen. It's overkill in some areas, but awesome in other areas, and let's talk about that. First off, let's talk about overkill. This thing is a 1080p screen with a refresh rate of up to 120 Hertz. I feel like the resolution is more than you actually need on a 7-inch device. Now, of course, there will be people who will point out that you can run the games at a lower resolution if you want, and that is absolutely true, but I feel like they probably could have saved some money by getting a lower resolution display. Similarly, the refresh rate at 120 Hertz sounds awesome on paper, and what I end up finding is the games that I'm running where I really care about frame rate, they can't get higher than 60 consistently anyway. So I end up just limiting it to 60, and for all the games that can run over 60 frames per second, I really don't care because they're usually like small indies there where it's not super important. But the two things about the panel that I absolutely adore are the colors and the variable refresh rate. The colors just pop off of the screen. It makes the Steam Deck look incredibly washed out by comparison. Yes, on Steam Deck you can use Vibrant Deck, but it's never going to look as good as the screen in the ROG Ally. Then you have variable refresh rate. On the Deck, I often have to open up the quick access menu and limit the refresh rate of the screen and limit the frame rate of the games in order to get them to match for a smooth gameplay experience. It's not a big deal that I have to do it, but in the ROG Ally, because it has a VRR display, I don't have to do anything. It just happens automatically, and that's awesome. Another positive is the comfort. I feel like the ROG Ally is actually a very comfortable device. The bottom corners do kind of dig into my palms just a little bit, but I feel like that friction makes it easier to hold in place and not have it move around as you're actually playing games. If I didn't have the Steam Deck to compare it to, I would say it was fantastic as far as comfort goes. But when you're comparing it to the Steam Deck, I feel like the Steam Deck is way more comfortable. It's definitely the most comfortable handheld device that I have used. And that's because it has those big, thick, rounded grips. And because it's not as comfortable as the Steam Deck, I think I'm gonna take it from fantastic down to fine. The buttons on the ROG Ally are fantastic. I think that they're a lot better than the buttons on the Steam Deck personally. All of them are really, really comfortable. They're very clicky, and early reviewers were saying that their X button was getting stuck, but I haven't run into anything even remotely close to that. In fact, I have zero complaints about any of the buttons on here with the exception of the volume buttons. The volume buttons on here are really hard to reach. They feel nice, but you can't like reach them while you're holding the device. You have to let go with one side so that you can actually adjust the volume. You can, however, just use the command center in order to bring up your volume controls on the touch screen, but I prefer to use buttons. One thing I was really skeptical of when they announced the ROG Ally is the D-pad. The D-pad, boy, it looks awful, doesn't it? But I gotta be honest, it feels really good. I'm not gonna say it's one of my favorite D-pads ever, but it definitely isn't the dumpster fire that I assumed it was going to be. It's not better or worse than the Steam Deck D-pad in my opinion. It's just different, and it works equally well. Of course, one thing that the Steam Deck got right is that it's super repairable by the end user. This is something that Valve nailed, and I'm happy to tell you that the ROG Ally is also equally as repairable. Actually, I would say the ROG Ally is even more repairable because the battery is so much easier to replace. It is covered by some weird thermofoil that will rip as you try and take it off, but if you want to replace the battery, it's not glued down, it's screwed down, and that's absolutely a win. But all the end user repairability in the world isn't going to do you any good if Asus doesn't make the replacement parts available. And right now, there's no place to get those replacement parts. So I don't know if I can put this as a check in the W column yet. It's definitely not a check in the L column either. It's somewhere in the middle. One thing that I can't really review is the external GPU support. The ROG Ally supports the external GPU, but it's prohibitively expensive. It's awesome that they have this as an option, but the fact that it costs like almost $1,000 for the cheapest external GPU that's compatible with the Ally means that most people are never going to take advantage of that. In fact, you're better off just building a secondary PC to play your games on rather than getting an external GPU for the Ally. One thing I don't like about the ROG Ally is the lack of input options. I have to be completely transparent here. I am a Steam controller fanboy. I loved the trackpads in that thing, and when I saw that the Steam Deck also had those trackpads, I was hyped for it, and they did not let down. Steam input is absolutely fantastic and allows you to play games on a handheld device that you would never be able to play on any other handheld device. Because there's no trackpads on the ROG Ally, that definitely takes it down a notch for me. The Steam Deck actually has 4 buttons on the back instead of 2, but I feel like the Steam Deck would have been just fine with just 2 buttons on the back instead of having 4. More options is great, but the ROG Ally, as far as the controls on the back of the device, they're totally fine. One thing that drives me crazy about the ROG Ally is the fact that it doesn't have gyro. Now, yes, there is a gyro in the device, but it's not supported by default, and there's no easy way to turn it on. And even if you can turn it on, it doesn't have capacitive thumbsticks, so there's no easy way for you to reset as you're moving the gyro around. You know, take your thumb off that joystick like you do on the Steam Deck and reset your gyro. You can't do that on the ROG Ally, so it's always going to be a step below in terms of controls for me. Let's talk about battery life. Obviously, it's going to depend on what games you're playing and what mode you're running in, so it's kind of hard to nail this down. The ROG Ally has a 40 watt-hour battery, which is essentially the same as the Steam Deck, but the ROG Ally also runs things a little bit better. So because of that, it's going to chew through that battery fairly quickly. Luckily, Asus gives us options as to how we're actually running our games. Now, the Steam Deck can run at lower wattage under the quick access menu all the way down to 3 watts if you're really playing a game that doesn't need a whole lot of power. The minimum watts you can run the Ally at is 7 watts, which means that the Steam Deck will have a better battery performance on the smaller, less demanding titles. Just for example, I ran Sonic Mania on silent mode, which is at 10 watts for 10 minutes, and the battery went from 40% down to 34%. Moving on to performance mode, I did the same test using Final Fantasy XII. In this mode, the Ally is running at 15 watts. I went from 30% down to 18% in 10 minutes. And then if you're playing the latest AAA games that really need more power, you're going to have to run these in turbo mode in order to get stable frame rates. Turbo mode is at 25 watts, and I did the same 10-minute test of Cyberpunk 2077 in turbo mode, and the battery went from 81% down to 63% in those 10 minutes. During sleep, you're going to lose about 2% per hour, so it might actually be in your best interest to just shut the Ally off when you're not using it, rather than putting it into standby mode. Okay, so you're obviously going to be chewing through the battery a little bit quicker on this device than on the Steam Deck, so how is it for charging? Well, when I plug my Ally in to charge, it went from 18% up to 63% in 25 minutes. This is, of course, charging with my 140-watt charging brick from Ugreen. And when I plugged the Ally into the official charger, it went from 63% up to 90% in 25 minutes. My absolute biggest gripe with the ROG Ally is Windows. The software is absolutely holding the hardware back, in my opinion. It's just like a Windows laptop, except you don't get the benefit of having a built-in mouse and keyboard, and so you're dependent on using either the joystick to navigate Windows or the touchscreen. I almost feel like the first time that you set up the ROG Ally, you don't really have much of a choice. You're definitely going to want to use a keyboard and mouse. I use the Keychron K4 Pro and the Logitech MX Master 3. Links in the description if you want to check those out. They're fantastic because they pair with your computer, my Windows computer, my Mac, and my ROG Ally all at the same time, and all I got to do is push a couple of buttons in order to swap those around. So because of Windows, on one hand, you're able to play games without having to worry about Linux compatibility, but you also run into a lot of weird things because this is a PC with a controller attached. It's not actually a console. For instance, when I launched Sonic Mania for the first time, it launched in a tiny little 1-inch window in the middle of the screen until I was able to navigate and put it in full screen mode. It's not a huge deal, but there will be times where you are using the ROG Ally and you're like, this again? It's just Windows jank over and over and over, and I don't think that Windows is ever going to get better at it. Now, in Asus's defense, they are doing everything that they really can in order to make up for the jank by using Armoury Crate, which overall I pretty much like. Armoury Crate gives you access to the Command Center button on the left-hand side, which lets you change things like the refresh rate without having to go through the Windows menu options yourself. And it also takes all of your different launchers and puts all of your games in one place. But it's still not as intuitive as Steam for me, so I usually end up just launching Steam, putting it in big picture mode, and launching all of my games from there anyway. Also, some general weirdness that I've run into where sometimes the screen just turns on at odd times when I'm not using it. I also was charging the device and I had the thumbsticks start flashing at me for some reason. I have no clue what that's all about. And then there's the fact that by default they bound some Windows functions like the Task Manager to the back button and D-pad, so that means that multiple times during gameplay I've gotten myself killed because I accidentally opened the Task Manager, and then I have to try and find the little tiny touch targets with my thumb in order to close that and get back to the game before I get killed. Now, one thing that's still up in the air about whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing is going to be support. Asus is traditionally not well thought of when it comes to supporting their products, and there were some issues with the ROG Ally at launch, and they were really quiet about it. Now, that doesn't mean that they weren't doing anything. It doesn't mean that they weren't trying to fix the issues. It just means that they weren't being super transparent about it. And transparency is super important, because if you're not transparent, then that's going to lead to speculation, and speculation is always going to err on the side of bad. So I think that it's in their best interest to make sure that they communicate more with their fan base for the people who've bought these devices and that might need something done with them. Hey everybody, Bill from the future here. I've got an update about support from ASUS about the ROG Ally. Kyle, aka Crowbite33, sent me this morning, and I wanted to share it with you since this video literally goes out in less than an hour. Hopefully I can get this put in time. Alright, here is what it is. It's an official statement from the official ROG Ally Discord, and here's what they say. Good evening everyone. HQ has released a new statement regarding their work on the Ally's SD card reader. We want to thank the community for their passionate response we've received for the ROG Ally. Your support has been immense and invaluable, so we've been hard at work to improve a number of things. After confirmation from internal testing under certain thermal stress conditions that the SD card reader may malfunction. To alleviate this issue, we will be releasing an update to further fine-tune the default and minimum fan speeds on the device to improve reliability while keeping fan noise in check, as we know this is a concern for many of you. If you are experiencing an issue with your SD card reader, please let us know, and we will inspect any issues and maybe warrant some repairs through RMA. Okay, so first off, I have to point out that I have not yet experienced any issue with my SD card reader in the ROG Ally. That being said, I still have yet to put my 1 terabyte SD card in my Ally because I'm nervous about what it will do. That's an expensive card and I don't want to ruin it. So I'm holding off for now until all of these problems are absolutely solved. I do have an SD card in my SD card reader in the ROG Ally, and I've experienced absolutely no issues. So it is possible that it is a issue with just a few devices and not a design issue. Like there's a difference between a hardware flaw and a design issue, and my fingers are crossed that it's a hardware flaw and not a design issue, because if it's a design issue, then it's going to affect all ROG Allies eventually. Now they're saying that they're going to RMA units and either replace or repair them, which is great. We'll see how that goes, but I didn't want to put this video out without letting you guys know about this issue. All right, back to the other bill. Now, despite its flaws, I think that the ROG Ally is a fantastic device, and it's the closest competitor that we have to the Steam Deck right now. Of course, there's going to be people that point out that the Steam Deck can be picked up for $400 or sometimes even lower on sale, and those people would be absolutely correct. But the ROG Ally is closer in price to the Steam Deck than it is those other handhelds competition. So I feel like really there's a competition of the ROG Ally and the Steam Deck right now, and everybody else is elsewhere. So after a month, can I recommend that people pick up the ROG Ally? Well, if you already have a Steam Deck, I'm going to say probably not. The amount of upgrade that you're getting from the Steam Deck is really not worth it, in my opinion, to buy a new device and then try and get rid of your old one. But if you don't already have a Steam Deck, then I think it depends on which type of games you like to play. If you play a lot of games that require anti-cheat that's not supported by Linux, then I would say the ROG Ally is probably the right device for you. Conversely, if you tend to play a lot of older games that require mouse and keyboard, I would say stay away from the ROG Ally and pick up a Steam Deck instead. Either way, I think they're both fantastic devices, and either way you go, you're going to be happy with what you buy. But what do you all think of the ROG Ally? Let me know in the comment section down below that like button, and if you enjoyed this video, you're probably going to enjoy this video right here. From the Nerd Nest, I'm Bill. Stay rad, everybody.